podcast. We believe that in constant change and growth that we find fulfillment, not in perfection. Perfection is like a closed door, whereas striving to be better is always an open door. Our purpose is to enhance the best of women every day by empowering yourself to create your own success stories. Empowerment comes through self-knowledge, accompanied by soft skills development and professional knowledge. Finally, a podcast for women that seeks to act intelligently and sustainably in all aspects of your life. As a mother, professional, a daughter, friend, spouse, and in your interactions with your community. May your life be an open door to many possibilities. We will inspire you to pursue the changes you need to achieve 5 stars in all aspects of your life. And now, your trusted advisor, Bettina Meyer-Flug.
Do you struggle to be updated in all HR requirements? Do you know how COVID impacted our employment laws? Are you curious to learn more about what changed in 2021? This is the right podcast for you. My name is Bettina Meyer-Flug, and I will be your host today. Besides helping nonprofits with my consulting company, I work as a life and executive coach, helping struggling women to find balance in their personal life and to accomplish a successful career that they always deserved and wanted. Throughout a series of one-on-one coaching sessions, I teach soft skills and hard skills related to technology. I just love what I do, and I'm always looking ways to learn more and to share relevant information with you guys. Today, I have a special guest called Tina Todd here with me. I met her in one of the United Way meetings where they explain in detail the shared service program and all their strategies. Tina is a co-founder of SimplyHR, a company that is intended to help small business and nonprofits minimize potential risk in several areas. SimplyHR is one of the providers from the United Way shared services. United Way of Larimer County shared service deliver high-quality professional back-office service to nonprofit organizations at below market rates. This program provides an opportunity to place operational tasks in hands of a trusted professional, allowing you and your staff to direct your time and attention toward making an impact in our community. As a participant in shared service, your organization will benefit from special expertise, new opportunities for collaboration and engagement, a variety of tools and resources designed to increase your efficiency and effectiveness, and access to technology that might be otherwise unaffordable and unavailable. Welcome, Tina. Can you please clarify our audience what are the HR services that your company is offering for nonprofits?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And first off, Bettina, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on Wisdom for Nonprofits. They hold a special place in my heart. So the services that we provide through SimplyHR, I'll start with for all organizations, our focus is really trying to minimize risk, as you mentioned. And we do that by understanding that the businesses are dealing with so many moving pieces, whether that's their programming or the services that they're offering, and also working with their customers, clients, participants. And so we realize that they don't have time and oftentimes don't have the resources to be watching all of the changes in HR laws. So we really try to take a proactive approach to make sure that they understand what changes are coming about and how they can easily apply those to their organization. When it comes to nonprofits, we've partnered with Larimer County's United Way, and we are one of the service offerings through their shared services program. They are also offering grant writing and marketing, and of course, HR. This is our second year with them, and they are providing sort of a group model so that all of these organizations have access to professional services, and they are able to deliver that at a bit of a cost savings to each of the participants. So if you are in Larimer County and you're a nonprofit, I would highly recommend looking into the shared services program.
And you mentioned they offer a series of training for nonprofits. Can you explain a little bit more about those trainings?
Sure. The trainings that I provide for the nonprofit shared services participants are every other month. Of course, they have been online for the last several months, and I take them in detail through a particular topic as it relates to HR and oftentimes the new rules and requirements for them. So for example, we recently did one on how to write a thorough job description and meet the requirements of the recent Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. But we tried to keep the topics relevant, fun, and interesting as much as HR can be. And we really appreciate all of the interaction that we get from our nonprofit shared services participants.
And you said it's also possible to have one-on-one coaching, for example, for an executive director. How does this work?
Sure. So whether that's through nonprofit shared services or directly through SimplyHR as a nonprofit client, we can meet with businesses or nonprofits really on any frequency. Depending on the size and the needs of the organization, we can meet on a monthly, quarterly, annual sort of basis, and oftentimes we will provide a bit of an audit that we believe is appropriate for that size and sort of industry or service. And we want to make sure that we are helping them avoid any potential hazards before they possibly make a mistake that could be costly to them. For nonprofit shared services, the idea is that some of the time that they get through the allocated time is based on those audits, and then the remainder of their time is really one-on-one time to use however they would like. So that can be questions about employee relations, or questions about paid sick and safe time, or perhaps it's reviewing a job description specific to them.
Oh, that's cool. But it's for sure a friendly audit, isn't it?
Of course, yes, absolutely. It's a friendly audit. I have so much respect for business owners and executive directors and anyone in the business world. We realize they have so much going on. By no means are we going to judge them for not knowing everything about HR. That just wouldn't be fair.
Oh, that feels comfortable. And I think it's important for them to know what you don't do. And in our conversation, you mentioned that you don't do payroll, but you recommend companies. What else SimplyHR doesn't do?
Yeah, so we deliberately chose the name SimplyHR because we want to make it clear that we do have a fairly narrow scope as far as our area of expertise. We will do a very deep dive into compliance and regulations, but we do not offer benefits. We are not a benefits broker, and we are also not a payroll company and don't offer any payroll type services or recruiting either. I'm not the best person with numbers, so believe me, nobody wants me working on their payroll. There are lots of experts out there that would be a much better fit for them.
But you can be a resource to recommend companies in the area they want. What I know that you don't write contracts, but you do offer an online database. Can you explain what is inside this online database that can help small business and nonprofits?
Sure. So I'm not an attorney. I am a certified HR professional, and I have my certification, 2 national certifications and one specific to California, if that's of interest to anyone. And our clients also, if they join one of our membership programs or the nonprofit shared services program, they have access to a platform called HR 360. And that is a platform that provides form and document templates such as paid time off request forms or model notices, things that are required or recommended as HR best practice processes. And then they also will get notifications from HR 360 on recent wage and hour law changes specific to their state. They can access posters from there. It really has a huge bank of resources. Something also that tends to be of interest to the nonprofit group is salary benchmarking, and I realize it is a little bit different for nonprofits, but it gives you a great place to start, and also provides job description templates. So I could really go on and on. There's a lot on there. We genuinely believe it's a great resource for all of our clients.
And talking a little bit more about the shared services. So United Way hire your company, and then the nonprofit needs to talk with United Way to have access to this shared service. How does it work?
Yep, that's exactly right. So we are a third-party vendor that's providing the shared services HR to United Way of Larimer County participants. The cost for participants can range for anywhere from $1,500 a year to $2,500 a year. But with that, they're really getting up to almost $6,000 of services because of United Way's ability to help collaborate and sort of subsidize some of the services. The participants can also add additional one-on-one coaching time if they feel like that's appropriate for their group. So all of that's available through uwaylc.org, and they can look at the shared services menu through there.
Oh, thank you so much. And for example, if a nonprofit needs to hire an executive director, the board members doesn't know exactly how to do that. How can you help on this challenge?
Yeah, so we don't do direct recruiting. We can certainly help create job descriptions, though, and do some salary benchmarking for the board of directors. And we can provide them coaching or interview questions, and also tell them what not to ask in interviews and help them through that process so that they find just the right executive director for their organization.
And also during the onboarding process, the first 3 months are the more crucial for a new employee. How can you support them in this onboarding process?
Sure. That first 3 months is really a blend of so many requirements from both state and federal and oftentimes local legislation, and then really building a great cultural fit with that new employee. So we want to make sure that, of course, we cover the specific requirements. So we coach our organizations on exactly what forms and documents and posters have to be provided and completed during that period of time. And then we also coach them through some best practices, things such as 30, 60, 90-day reviews, mentorship programs, what a full comprehensive orientation and training period looks like. So we really help the organizations every step of the way in developing a great program for their new employees as they begin.
Oh, that's cool. And for example, for then a brand new executive director, what kind of support you can give them?
For a new executive director, depending on their experience, oftentimes we're talking about the best ways to coach and help with corrective action. Oftentimes they have to make tough decisions on who to keep on their team, and we want to talk through ways to help improve performance, or perhaps unfortunately, sometimes employees have to be let go. So what are the best ways to do that, and also to minimize your risk, both legal risk to the organization, and also perhaps minimizing the chance for somebody to collect unemployment if that doesn't seem like the appropriate thing.
Oh, that's good. It's an amazing support because as I heard, nonprofits, they wear, different hats, people who work for nonprofits, and they have to do everything, and having a support like that can really make their lives very easy. I heard also you have a good partner and in your business called Nikki, and she made an amazing work by preparing some training in a delicate field, the sexual harassment prevention. The training is called Define the Line. Can you tell more about this project?
Yes. So a few years ago, Nikki and I are business partners. We created SimplyHR almost 5 years ago now. And in one day, and this was before Time's Up, one day, 3 local businesses contacted us letting us know that they had concerns about sexual harassment in their workplace, either allegations or concerns that they had heard about. And so they had asked us for resources and ways that they could train and be preventative in their approach to this going forward. And Nikki and I are a little bit of research nerds, so we really dove into the topic. And having been former HR generalists, we were familiar with a lot of the trainings that were out there, and we really didn't feel great endorsing and recommending a lot of the training programs. So we partnered with researchers across the country. We, again, did so much research on this particular topic and decided, sort of jokingly at first, that we would write a comic book. And then through this sort of journey, we discovered that comic books are actually great learning tools. Employees are very engaged. They have an emotional connection with this comic book type format. So from that, Define the Line was born. We surveyed our community both locally and online to hear how is sexual harassment showing up in the workplace now, because we certainly didn't want any outdated, cheesy scenarios. So we took the most common themes and we wrote them into scenarios in our comic book with lots of help from experts in victim advocacy and also in the comic book world, because we had never written a comic book before. And so we created Define the Line a couple of years ago. It was really exciting. And really, through the time of COVID, that side of our business has evolved so much because it turns out virtual training platforms like Zoom are a really safe place for employees to have vulnerable discussions. They can often be anonymous and they can share stories either with their team or with other individuals who are sort of there's certainly a strategy to how we put together trainings, but oftentimes they're with people they don't know, which is a much safer space to share those stories. And they can have really engaging, vulnerable conversation that gives them great takeaways and tips and ways to address things in the future. We have focused on making Define the Line compliant for all of the states that are requiring sexual harassment prevention training. So it's a really fantastic resource. And in fact, Nikki is going to, she hasn't announced it quite yet to the world, but soon there may be a special benefit for a lucky nonprofit. So if you don't already, I would recommend following Define the Line comic on just about any social media channel, and you will be sure to get information, or you can go to the website at definethelinecomic.com and you'll get some updates about what we have coming for nonprofits.
Oh, that's awesome. And also for small business.
Absolutely, yes. And we're also working with some larger businesses too. So it's been really, really exciting to see that side of the business grow. Of course, we hope to get to a point where we don't have to have those conversations anymore, but we have a lot of work to do before we get there.
Yeah, for sure. So now let's start our main topic, that is new employment laws for 2021. There will be a lot of new happening in 2021. New year, new administration, new regulations, new to-do lists, new resolutions. Some of these news are known for sure, but some are still in work. Tina, can you please help us understand what is changing?
Yes, maybe we should start with what is not changing. So I guess, COVID put everything into a tailspin. And so it's really important to note that the federal laws and the Department of Labor and Fair Labor Standards Act have their one set of rules. And then each state also has its own set of rules and laws applicable to businesses with employees or independent contractors. So it's important to note that both apply. Oftentimes a city like the city of Denver may have additional requirements too. If and when those rules overlap and contradict each other, you are always required to give the benefit that is most advantageous to the employee. For example, the federal minimum wage is much lower than the Colorado minimum wage, so you would have to go with Colorado. And Denver's is higher than the state, so you would need to go with Denver's minimum wage if you have employees there. So with all that being said, Colorado had a lot of updates to employment laws in 2021. I'm guessing we're going to dive into those a little bit, but they really include things like paid sick and safe time, a whistleblower protection act, and equal pay for equal work is a huge sweeping change for our state as well.
So everything that we're going to cover here, it's most related to Colorado, but you can research locally how can this apply to your region. But what are the highlights of the new employment law here in Colorado?
Yeah, great question. As far as resources, I would always recommend that somebody uses a .gov site as their resource. There are a lot of blogs out there that are outdated, and I'm sure they were absolutely accurate when they were written. So it's important to know that if you're doing your own research, just go to the .gov site so that you get the most recent information directly from the source. So for Colorado changes, we have now a Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, and that began in January of 2021. And the idea behind it is to create more transparency around what earnings are at each organization and what each job title entails. So the act requires the employer to announce all advancement opportunities at the same time to their organization. And each job title also has to have a comprehensive job description and a specified pay range. And all of those things must be posted when the job is posted. Some other parts of this, employers are prohibited from asking somebody's previous pay or salary during any part of the employment process or interview process. So if you're curious, you can absolutely ask what somebody is interested in making, what they hope to make in a new role, but no longer can you ask what somebody made in their last position. What you are offering should really be based on industry averages, geographic averages, and what that position is worth to your organization. If, for example, somebody was underpaid at their last nonprofit, we certainly don't want to continue underpayment and potentially perpetuate a pay gap. We want to really pay them based on what the organization feels is appropriate. And then with all of that, you're required to maintain records of job descriptions and wage rate history for each employee through their employment and then for 2 years after employment ends. So to-dos for businesses in the state of Colorado are just to audit your job descriptions, make sure they're up to date and current. You can certainly ask your employees for feedback on them. They would probably appreciate that. And they may be able to contribute things that you've perhaps forgotten about that they do. And then you'll also need a pay range for each of those. And you'll have to be mindful when doing your job postings to be sure that you're posting them fairly and everybody has access at the same time.
Oh, that's good. So they have to have a good technology infrastructure behind. Since they have to keep documents for 2 years, they have to be very organized for sure. And what changed with COVID in your point of view?
Everything. COVID changed a lot. It highlighted the need for paid sick time. It also highlighted the ability for a lot of individuals to work remotely. And I realized that so many nonprofits provide direct client services. So obviously that wouldn't be an option for those individuals, but it's really provided a lot of flexibility around workplaces. And I think sort of humanized each worker. Now that we've seen everybody's cats and kids and pets and kitchens, they're all real people now and not just executive directors or what have you. So that's changed a lot, and it has created some additional laws, of course. So for Colorado specifically, one that is new for us is a Public Health Emergency Whistleblower Act. So this one became effective in July of 2020, and it prohibits any type of adverse action or discrimination or retaliation against a worker who raises any good faith complaints about safety related to a public health emergency. What's really interesting about this one is the Act uses the language worker. It does not say employee. So this not only covers employees at your organization, but independent contractors or consultants, anyone who is involved in working with your nonprofit would be covered by this. So of course, sorry?
Even volunteers?
Even volunteers, I would assume. That's a great question. I haven't specifically dug into that, but yes, they use the broad language of worker. So I would just be mindful that those individuals have rights that are covered under the law. And of course, we are hopefully all, receiving those concerns and complaints with open-mindedness and putting in any precautions that we can and are able to. And if you have questions about it, the counties have been really helpful in providing support to businesses who have questions about what to do in their workplaces.
That's great. And how is going to work the paid sick time? As you mentioned, this was a big change. How is it going to work?
Sure. So there are two separate parts of this. So there was a Healthy Families and Workplaces Act, and under that, it required what's called paid sick and safe time. So there are two portions of this, I guess. So paid sick and safe time is applicable all the time, whether we are in a public health emergency or not. And paid sick and safe time is required for organizations with 16 or more employees beginning in 2021. And if an organization has 15 or fewer employees, then they'll have to implement this in 2022. So what paid sick and safe time says is that you must provide to your employees as soon as they start working some paid sick and safe time, either on a front-loaded basis, so you can give it to them all up front, but at a minimum, you have to let them accrue the time. And the employees accrue this whether they are full-time, part-time, exempt, non-exempt, and they must get at least 1 hour of paid sick and safe time for every 30 hours worked. So in case you're trying to do the math in your head, that is an hourly accrual rate of 0.0333 hours per hour worked. All of the payroll software that's out there is certainly able to accrue this automatically for you. So I would consider looking into that if you haven't already and it's required. And then the state says that the employees must accrue up to a maximum of 48 hours per year. So that is a pretty generous paid sick and safe plan for a state to roll out. And they can use that time for traditional sick purposes or reasons that fall under the safe time provision. So this is a little bit unique to Colorado also. There are a few other states doing this. And it's really for an employee to use for themselves or a family member if they are victims of domestic abuse, sexual assault, or harassment. So there's a list of allowed uses under sick time or safe time, but that's sort of the gist of paid sick and safe time. And then to continue on your question about paid time off related to COVID, there is now also a public health emergency leave. So this was also part of the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act, and it said that during the time that Colorado has a declared public health emergency, if employees do not currently have a bank of hours to use for sick time, if they were to need time off related to that public health emergency, then they should have access to up to 2 weeks or 80 hours for a full-time employee. So right now we are under a public health emergency, which has been declared by our governor through at least January 20th, so 5 more days. I would imagine this will be extended. So for the full time that this is in effect, we will have public health emergency leave. So I feel like I'm really rambling, but it's also important to note that there is a federal Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That is no longer a requirement, but it is voluntary, but it does come with a benefit of a tax credit, and that goes through March 31st. So as you can see, lots of overlapping pieces, and we understand it's very confusing. We spend a lot of time reading through it, so if anyone has questions, they can certainly contact us.
Can you explain deeply what is safe time?
Sure. So like I mentioned, safe time is really for someone who has been the victim of domestic abuse, sexual assault, or harassment, or their family. And so safe time covers things like if they need to seek medical attention because of one of those reasons, if they need to obtain services from victim services organization, or if they need to seek relocation because of it. They can also use that time to seek out legal services, mental health, or other counseling. So I think it's really nice that our state is recognizing that sick time is not just physical illness, but also, taking care of your safety is part of your overall health.
And then you mentioned extends to family members. Who is considered a family member?
Sure. So a family member by this particular definition is a person who's related by blood, marriage, civil union, adoption, a legal guardian, or a child who is under your guardianship. So close family members. And it also does cover parents or children who are in place of a perhaps blood or marriage child or parent.
Okay. And how does it work, the public health emergency leave? You mentioned a little bit, but how does this work?
Mm-hmm. So if an employee were to approach you and say that they are perhaps sick with COVID-related symptoms and they need to seek a medical diagnosis, or if they have a child who's home because of a school closure related to COVID, then the employee should then know that those reasons trigger public health emergency leave, and the employee would be provided up to 2 weeks of their pay if they need the full 2 weeks at their regular rate. And again, there's a federal component too. So if this is before March 31st and the employee has not received FFCRA leave in 2020 or prior to this, then the employer would give those 2 weeks of paid time off, and they could also qualify for a tax credit through FFCRA. So those are things you'll certainly want to work with your payroll provider for, and also perhaps your bookkeeper or accountant to make sure that hours are being tracked accurately.
So the employee doesn't need to work. They can, for example, if the schools require the kids to stay home, the parent can stay home without working, or they need to work online if it's possible and still receive their salary. How does it work?
Sure. Yep. So there are some, certainly some rules around it. If a child is under the age of 14, then FFCRA says that they can get the tax credit. If a child is over that age or really doesn't need the supervision, then hopefully the employee can still continue to work from home and telework or telecommute, and they wouldn't receive that. But if their child is truly needing full-time supervision, the employee is unable to work, or if they're only able to work a portion of their schedule, then they may qualify for a portion of paid leave for the time that they're not working. So again, public health emergency is 2 weeks. If we look at the federal FFCRA rules, that length of time could be much longer. So lots of moving parts, and you'll want to closely analyze the circumstances before choosing which route to go.
Okay. And what is the Public Health Emergency Whistleblower Act?
So the Public Health Emergency Whistleblower Act is the one that I mentioned, where you cannot retaliate or have adverse action against a worker. So employee, independent contractor, perhaps volunteer, as you mentioned, if they raise concerns to you, again, about the way that safety is perhaps being handled at the organization.
And in 2020, discrimination was a big thing all around the world. And I hope they created an act to protect discrimination against hair. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes. So this is called the Crown Act, and Colorado was actually the 13th state to enact this particular language in the legislation. And Crown stands for Creating Respectful Open World for Natural Hair. So this went into effect in March of 2020, and it it prohibits discrimination based on somebody's race as it relates to their hair texture, hair type, or a hairstyle that is historically or typically associated with race. So, for example, you cannot have a hygiene policy that says hair must be neatly combed, because if you are wearing your natural hair and you have a afro, then it is not reasonable for you to neatly comb your hair every day. And we certainly want to allow individuals to be themselves in their most natural way. So we cannot discriminate against applicants or employees for things like that. So ways we see that show up, again, our hygiene policies. And we also want to look at hiring practices to be sure that your team does not have any discriminatory actions against individuals who are applying or currently working at the workplace. I've had many calls and questions, or perhaps business owners or managers are upset or confused when somebody changes their hair into cornrows. And I think the most important thing to remember is that somebody is likely going to still be very effective at their job if they have been previously and they change their hair from one style to another. So there's little to no job relatedness unless you are in a very specific industry. So I'm thankful that Colorado added this language. I think it's unfortunate that we have to call these things out, but it's nice to see that we live in such a progressive state.
Oh, that's cool. And what changed with Equal Pay for Equal Work Act implementation?
So Equal Pay for Equal Work is the act that requires job descriptions and pay scales for each position. So that will require a lot of additional work for the administrative team at the beginning of the year to make sure that you are up to date and compliant with that. And I'm a firm believer in having really thorough job descriptions. So I would carefully look at all of the tasks that are truly essential to the job. And I would also look at physical requirements of the job. I think oftentimes we forget about this. So does somebody have to be on a computer for up to 8 hours a day? If you have an applicant who cannot do that because of perhaps a disability, then what are some accommodations that you might be able to make? And I think it's important to call those things out at the beginning and work through those possible challenges and hurdles at the beginning of employment. Then after somebody starts and they realize, oh, I actually have to be on Zoom calls for 8 hours a day, and I physically cannot do that because of perhaps some sort of disability. But there are often lots of workarounds, maybe a screen filter or maybe a standing desk. There are so many ways we can often accommodate individuals with some workplace disabilities. So that's something I would certainly recommend putting on a job description too. And of course, we want to include how many hours somebody's working, who they report to, if they have supervisory responsibilities, everything you can think of. If somebody needs a license and a vehicle to use for business purposes, then that should all go in there too. So this quarter is a great time to reassess all of those, and then I would use those as you're having performance reviews and annual check-ins with your employees to make sure they're still applicable.
Great tips. Thank you so much. And how does it work, the unemployment layoff?
Yes, great question. And the unemployment program has been stretched and stressed in the last year, as you can imagine. So there are several things to consider, especially as it relates to COVID right now. So unemployment, generally speaking, provides a partial wage replacement to an individual who has lost their job due to no fault of their own. So if you are separating an employee, if you are laying off an employee, it's important to note that there's a difference between a layoff, where maybe your business is not able to operate, or you don't need as many employees because of maybe COVID restrictions. Those are layoffs. But if you have a poor performing employee and you're not going to have them work for you anymore, and you are going to hire someone to replace their position, then that is not a layoff, that is a termination. So sometimes I know it's easier to tell somebody, oh, we're laying you off, but we should just call it what it is, because it does have a different meaning as it applies to unemployment. So typically, when an employee is laid off, or when they lose their job due to no fault of their own in any way, then the business is charged the amount that the former employee is getting in benefits. And when I say charged, they don't send you a bill saying, employee Bob is collecting unemployment, here's what you owe us directly for that. It works a little bit differently than that. And there are two different types of unemployment systems. There's the traditional unemployment tax, and then many nonprofits, as I'm sure all of you know, are on a self-funded program. So it really depends on which particular program the nonprofit is on. And for this last year, if somebody was laid off due to a COVID-related reason, then the business is not being charged the benefit amount for that former employee. Those benefits are coming directly out of a state trust fund for the state of Colorado. And so, again, it's important to note that the employees in Colorado losing their jobs due to COVID are not being charged directly to the employer. And then I guess for normal circumstances, when you are deciding to terminate an employee, it's really important to document why the employee is being terminated, so you can prove that they did play a part in losing their job. So it's important to have those performance discussions to let them know how they're not meeting expectations. If there are policy and procedure violations, we want to have documentation that they understood those through a handbook acknowledgement, and again, coaching and corrective action conversations. If you can show that your employee was notified of the expectations, they were basically choosing not to fill expectations or choosing not to accept suitable work, then oftentimes you can maybe have an employee disqualified from receiving an unemployment benefit, if that feels like the most appropriate thing to do. I know it's sort of a touchy subject.
I agree with you. And do we have any changes on the overtime and minimum pay standards here?
Yeah, so Colorado has, as well as every state, has what's called a wage order. So the wage order is the set of rules that apply to employees in this state. And this covers things like meal and rest breaks, minimum pay, overtime, minors, travel time, all of those questions related to wage and hour for the state. Some things that changed in the state of Colorado are, of course, minimum wage went up. It's now $12.32. And overtime, as you mentioned, is applicable for employees who work over 40 hours in a week. Colorado is unique in that it also has 12 hours consecutively, triggers overtime, and 12 hours in a work day. So if your employees are working split shifts, those are things that may apply. I think the most important thing to note, and this is where we see probably the most errors, is assuming that if somebody is paid on a salary basis, that they are exempt from overtime. And that is, again, a really common misunderstanding. And we provide lots of trainings just on this particular topic. So I'll try to summarize it as best as I can. But hourly and salary are really just ways that we pay people. In order for somebody to be exempt from minimum wage and overtime rules, they have to meet a whole series of tests. And I can't really go into all of those tests now, but one of the tests is a salary basis. So federally, the Department of Labor says that an employee must make at least $684 per week to be exempt. And just this year in 2021, Colorado started a scheduled increase of that minimum salary. So this year, that minimum salary is now $778 per week. And that's the equivalent to about $40,500 per year. And it's important to note that there are scheduled increases over the next several years of about $5,000 per year. So again, in order for somebody to be exempt from minimum wage and overtime, they have to meet at least that minimum salary, and they have to be performing certain duties or functions within the organization. And those can be found in the full Colorado Comps Order. We are now on Comps Order 37. That's something really important to note. If you have employees paid on a salary and not making overtime, you should double check all of those tasks and pay rates.
Thank you. I don't know about you, but I feel there's so much information that you share with us. And if if they need any support to understanding better for any small business or nonprofits, how they can get in touch with you, Tina, and with Nikki?
Sure. So the best way to contact us is through our probably website. There's a contact us form there, and that website is simplyhrpartners.com. Again, if you have questions about the comic book too, you can download a free harassment investigation checklist. I hope you never have to use it, but if you do need one, there is one available there at definethelinecomic.com. And hopefully you are able to participate in the Larimer County Nonprofit Shared Services Program through United Way for Larimer County. And you can go to their website to find out more information about that program and to sign up.
Thank you, Tina. I really appreciate your time. I know that time is the most valuable thing we have in our lives. I know you'd rather be with your family, and you're here sharing this very important information with our nonprofits and small business. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you another time.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all of your nonprofits and the fantastic work that they are doing. I hope to cross paths with them at some point.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Wisdom Women Podcast. To hear past and future episodes, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast channel. We appreciate your reviews and suggestions for future show topics. If you have a question or a suggestion, please write to us at podcast@wity.tech. More resources are available for you at our website, wity.tech. And please join us in the Wisdom for Nonprofits group on LinkedIn. Wisdom Woman is copyright 2020 by Bettina Meyer Flug and WITY.Tech, all rights reserved.